What do you mean by illegal immigration policy?
So how does the United States handle illegal immigration right now? What are ways that we're dealing with it?
Well, one thing is they're trying to stop it from happening by border patrols. They also have drones that will that have cameras on them and stuff, so that they can watch and see if anyone goes over the border without going through a checkpoint or whatever. So that's just to prevent it outright. But then for discovering them, things like crimes, if they look them up in the database, and they're not there, that's a huge tip-off that they are probably an illegal immigrant, because everyone who's a U.S. citizen will be in the database. Applying for jobs also can do this, not always, because some job owners sort of just look over it, because illegal immigrants can be a lot cheaper than legal immigrants, because they're not legal. You can pay them under minimum wage, no one will know. But law-abiding businesses are required to look them up beforehand, and if they're not in the system at all, then they can find out that way, and the business can report to, I guess, the government and say, hey, this guy is not in the system, can you check that out? So they have a bunch of different ways of checking it out.
Yeah, and you have other government agencies like ICE, which is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which are kind of work with the border and handling illegals and deporting them.
But how do you deal with the sanctuary city situation? And if you watch the news, the last couple days, you have mayors of major cities saying, we're not going to help the federal government with this immigration problem. We're going to continue to be a sanctuary city, which means if they arrest somebody on the street or somebody commits a crime, they're required by law to turn them over to federal authorities, but they don't. So how do we move forward on that?
Well, Donald Trump's policy, he said that he wants to end sanctuary cities by cutting funding to that city until they comply with the federal government. So if you are a sanctuary city and you refuse, he's going to cut all government funding to your city until you will reply.
Okay. Is that going to solve the problem?
I think it could, because cutting federal government funding to an entire city is a pretty big issue, because they won't really have the money to do anything
Yeah,
if
and
they
gives
want.
public pressure to make the city comply.
The citizens of the city are going to start pressuring the mayor, and they might even vote the mayor out if he is a pro-sanctuary city mayor.
Does the city belong to the nation, or does the city belong to the state?
States versus federal.
It's a state.
Versus state.
Have we had in the past issues what the state believes and what the federal believes?
On this issue, I'm not sure, but yeah.
With respect to illegal immigrants, what do you guys feel like they should have as far as constitutional protections? So as citizens of the United States, we all have certain rights that are enumerated in the Constitution. Should illegal immigrants have those same rights if they're arrested for a crime or charged with something?
Once you enter the U.S. justice system, if you're arrested, even if you're not a citizen, you automatically have the rights of a U.S. citizen if you are in the system. So if you are arrested, you have the Miranda rights, you have all the amendment rights when you're arrested.
Do you think that's a good policy? I mean, obviously, like you talked about before, it seems to be a waste of resources to say, certain people are going to be entitled to counsel that the government then has to pay for.
Yeah.
So all of our taxes are going to pay for lawyers to defend people who should not even be in the country. I mean, do you think that's a good use of resources or a good policy to have, or should we
I think
do away with it?
It could be a good policy, because there's been abuse of it before. And if we arrested an immigrant and didn't give them, if we decided that we were going to try them here, if they were in the system, we have to give them a fair trial. You can't just, I don't think it's right to give someone a trial that isn't fair.
That's like human rights. We believe as Americans, we have natural, innate rights, and they're people, even though they're immigrants, and they're people, so they also are entitled to those rights.
Ben, I'm glad you brought that up. Can after you get your citizenship, can it be rescinded?
After you get your citizenship?
Yeah, after you've immigrated and you've got your,
I'm not sure.
If you have permanent citizenship, I don't think so.
I wouldn't
You
think
can
so.
renounce it, but I don't think the government can forcefully take that away from you after they've given it to you.
Because it's a long process, so, you know.
And what about dovetailing with that? I mean, what about in the case of legal immigration where somebody gets, you know, an H-1B visa or an H-1A or something like that? If they commit a crime or do something that we really don't like, can we revoke the visa
Yeah,
at that
you
point?
could. It usually only happens for like heinous crimes like murder, rape, that kind of stuff. It doesn't usually happen for like,
Disorderly conduct.
yeah,
or-
disorderly conduct.
You get a parking ticket.
Right.
you're out of here. We don't need that riffraff.
Jaywalking.
Right, exactly. So I noticed that 2 out of the 4 have athletic gear on. So I guess one's a run. You're a runner, Zach.
I quit sophomore year for
Okay.
music.
And you play football.
Yes, sir.
So what do you think about what country? If you say you didn't make it in the NFL, but the NFL was in other countries, which we're doing, what other country do you think you would want to live in and maybe immigrate to in order to play football?
I guess I would say Canada.
Doesn't say
CFL.
I would like to go to Germany.
Doesn't say Brad. I'm sorry, Zach. What's that?
I would like to go to Germany if I had the option. I just really think Germany's a cool place. I'm half German, and I don't know, I just think it's a really cool place, and I like it there. So.
Do you know what their do you have any idea in your research
Yes.
as far as what these other countries, what kind of immigration
I know
issues they
Canada's policy,
Okay.
but I don't think we have Germany.
I don't know if they're Germans,
Canada has a two-step process. You have to become a permanent resident of Canada, which there's two main steps, and it's the CPC verifies whether your requirements are met, and the requirements are based on your age, your job opportunities, how well you speak the languages, because Canada has 2 foreign languages. You have to be literate in one of them. So French and English. If you're literate in English but can't really speak French well, or vice versa, they'll let you in. And then it's based on the job opportunities is the biggest one. So if you can work, you're more likely to get a permanent citizenship than someone else. And then the step 2 is a complete background check and medical exam with the police. They have to get your police records, and the PR expires every 5 years, and you have to be living in Canada 2 years out of those 5 years to keep it. So if you're not in Canada for 2 years out of the 5, they won't give you another one. And then for permanent Canadian citizenship, you have to be 18 plus, be able to speak and write either French or English. You have to be a permanent resident of Canada. You have to declare that you want to live there permanently. You have to live in Canada as a permanent resident for 4 years, and you have to have all of your taxes paid. And then if you meet all those requirements, they'll give it to you.
So you said you had another country? Did you do another?
I think
We have a few other countries, but not quite as in depth as that. Yeah, we have Denmark,
Sweden.
Sweden.
Okay.
You got
Australia,
UK on?
Yeah, I think we have.
Did you want to? Would you expand on that one?
Let's see. So from 2001, they've had nearly 75 million immigrants. So, shoot. So they've cracked down on immigration. They have tougher immigration reforms. So I don't really know like the whole process, but if you're considered like illegal and stuff, they'll fine you with like a $1,532 fee. But I'm not too sure on the whole immigration process to the UK.
That's fine. I assume that these countries have a lot. Any of the other countries, Zach, that you want to touch on? Is there a lot of immigrants going to a place like Germany or somewhere like that?
I think the most interesting country of immigration is Japan, because Japan is having a population crisis right now, partially because of the women in Japan a lot of them are not marrying. They're going into jobs and stuff and then just refusing to marry. And there's a weird thing going on over there where a bunch of men are actually marrying like robots and stuff, because that's allowed over there, and that's actually that's a thing that happens there. And then Japan is very, very. Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. And Japan does not really like outsiders very much, so their immigration policy is like really strict. But because it's so strict, they can't really keep up with their population because they're not having very many children, and their population is set to decline by 2/3, sorry, in just about 50 years. And the immigration policy is not letting very many people in at all because they don't like outsiders. And I think that's interesting because they kind of need immigration at this point, and they're still not allowing it.
It takes a lot to get in.
Yeah.
Like the process is like 15 years. You have to have
Yeah.
10 years as a resident and 15 years to complete the process.
Wow.
They really favor a homogeneous population, so that's probably another reason why the Japanese women aren't marrying, because there's a lot of foreigners over there. But they've experienced something similar to this. Like I know in World War II, reason that Japan became such a great big power was that it started kind of refusing isolationism and started accepting other workers and growing their industry. And that's kind of something that they're facing today as well.
So if we think about, as I was thinking about this panel today, I thought about the Statue of Liberty in New York. You guys know the quote that's at the bottom of that?
Yes.
So it talks about, give us your tired, give us your poor, give us your wretched refuse. But as I hear about the legal immigration policy, I mean, it seems to be like more the quote should be, give us your doctors and give us your dentists. You spell lawyers and scientists.
Engineers.
That we're not really that interested in getting your bottom strata of your population. We're interested in your best and your brightest. Send those to America and keep the rest there. First, what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that that's then a problem for these countries of origin, in that they're sending their best and brightest to America?
I think that we can accept the poor, because you can be poor and still have a good work ethic. And that's what I think they're really looking for. And if you're brighter, then you tend to get those higher education, which can translate to bigger jobs. So I think we can still accept them, but it's just a matter of, the mindset. Like if they're going to just be ruinous to our country, then that's where there's an issue. Legal immigration is good, but illegal immigration is negative.
Other thoughts?
And I'll go kind of what Ben said with like the poor immigrants. If the Mexicans, if they come over here legally, and like what they said, there's really a bunch of hard-working Mexicans that are coming over to the U.S. to find jobs to help the economy and everything. I feel like that could be a good thing, but just also illegally, I totally disagree.
Do you think in any ways the United States laid the groundwork in 1945 when we brought back from Nazi Germany literally hundreds of top scientists who were part of the Nazi regime, who helped us eventually win it, or at least take the lead in the arms race, put a man on the moon first, because it was the best and the brightest that we were recruiting, right? And the best and the brightest, we said, okay, you get a do-over. We're gonna. So do you think that we set forth policy and procedure back then that may be negatively affecting or positively impacting our policies and procedures of today?
I think it definitely affected it. And it really depends on if you're negative or positive, if you're on the view of we're trying to help America or we're trying to help the world, because those two conflict a lot in immigration, because you're helping the world if you're taking the poor from other countries and trying to give them better lives, but that is also hurting America. It can hurt America if they're not being productive members of society. But then you're helping America if you're taking the best and brightest from other countries to America. But then that's sort of hurting the world. So that really depends on if your goal is to help America or the world.
How accountable is the United States? I think about a former SS major became the head of NASA, Wernher von Braun. It's like, is that okay? Is that cool that we did that? Because you're kind of setting a precedent. He became a U.S. citizen, but he was also someone, if he hadn't been a brilliant scientist, he could have potentially been convicted of war crimes. So is that a dangerous, is that a dangerous tightrope that we're walking?
if he went through the legal channels and became a citizen, then he would swear a oath of allegiance. I mean, that means that he was checked to make sure that he actually, had renounced his Nazism and become an actual U.S. citizen dedicated to defending and protecting America.
So, okay, so with that in mind, and we'll talk about von Braun specifically, so we knew everything that he had done. We specifically went after him and we made him a U.S. citizen, and he became the head of NASA, and he led, brilliant man. But also, he was an SS major, which, that's one of the most evil organizations ever to walk the face of the earth. So the United States set a really, a slippery slope of a precedent that we set back then by saying, listen, we're going to go ahead and make you a U.S. citizen, bring your family over, and all is forgiven. And you get to go off and have a great life as an American. You ever know, if you hadn't been a brilliant scientist, you may have been a convicted war criminal. Do you think that, those types of situations, are they impacting today's present policy and procedure? Will we make exceptions?
Because when we take, especially like von Braun, it shows that it wasn't his character that mattered, it was what he knew, because he was a pretty messed up person. I mean, the Nazis, they were evil, and then we took him in as a U.S. citizen anyway. And I think now we can see that through a lot of the government corruption. If you're helping the government, it doesn't matter what you do as long as you're helping. They'll excuse pretty much anything that you're going to do.
Is it okay to have those exceptions? Is it okay to
I
have those
personally
exceptions to
don't
the rule?
think
Okay.
I agree with second chances, but that's a different thing, giving someone a second chance than just completely excusing everything they've done. Like, if they're not really going to change and seriously, believe that what they did was wrong and they want to change everything, then I'm okay with it. But if they're secretly, they don't actually feel remorseful for what they've done and they don't actually want to change, then I don't agree with that at all.
Okay.
I mean, you also have to look that the United States headed the Nuremberg trials, which prosecuted SS war criminals. Why did we prosecute certain SS war criminals and with the death penalty, but we let a few of them go? Like, we hung, I can't remember, it was one of the German ministers over one of the departments. We killed almost all the Nazis tried in the Nuremberg trials, well, almost all of them sentenced to death, except I think 4 or 5. There's a couple that got off. So why did they die and this guy was allowed to live? But they were in the same place.
Yeah, they're great questions you ask. Yeah, it's some interesting research. I encourage you guys to do a little bit of follow-up research. Because it's kind of a loaded question, right? We set a precedent all those years ago, and it's like, the United States certainly it's a flawed system. I think we could all agree with that. It's not perfect right now.
Along those lines, I'm curious as to, we talked about illegal immigration, but then to bring it to the C in the LCA, right, we have certain Christian principles about, doing things unto the least of these. How do we reconcile Christian principles with conservative political philosophy and say, it's okay to kick these people out who are searching for a better life because they came here illegally. We don't have to, be kind to them or forgive them or allow them to live here when that's a Christian principle that we espouse. And I think as a nation we espouse that to some extent. How do we reconcile those two things?
Well, he does say that we need to take care of the poor and watch over our brothers and sisters, but he also says that we need to fall in line with the policies of the nation we live in. Like when he said to the Jews to pay Caesar's taxes, even though they didn't agree with him at all. So I think that we shouldn't hold animosity towards the illegal immigrants. We shouldn't hate them for what they're trying to do, but they do need to go through the channels.
Yeah, given to Caesar what is Caesar.
We could even say that they should be granted amnesty if they're already here and they've already kind of done what they needed to do. That if we bring them under the system, it could fix a lot of the problems.
The only thing is we have to fix the system first. And like, President-elect Trump has said, we need to fix the system before we really start accepting other people in. To reconcile Christianity with that, just go with the processes that are and be compassionate. Obviously, we wouldn't want to be with like the 20th century, how they really had like a lot of nativism. They even established a anti-immigration league, or immigration restriction league,